Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Leverton Review, where I review literally everything: books, movies, podcasts, plays, whatever. And recently, my son and I we watched the reboot of Malcolm in the Middle, like reboot sequel. There's only like 4 episodes, so it's basically like watching a movie in terms of length, which I think I don't know. I have mixed feelings because I think that they could have made a fuller season with it, and maybe they kind of split it up because they want to introduce uh, the second part of the show being more connected to his daughter. But the show is literally called Malcolm in the Middle, and I have so many like conflicting thoughts because I really liked it, but I get this feeling. My son and I we watched a review from Alex Myers, and he was saying that he didn't. I mean, he thought that it was okay, but compared to the original, he felt like it lacked charm and color and originality. But I have to say, I think his perspective is from someone who grew up watching Malcolm in the Middle. I didn't grow up watching Malcolm in the Middle. I was probably too old uh, and too young at the same time because I think the target demographic for that show was kids, but also adults who had children that age. So it kind of ticked both boxes, kind of like the early Simpsons. They were funny for both audiences. And so I think when Alex Myers grew up and he like approached it from his perspective, he's seeing it from the perspective of a kid who grew up, you know. So it's an interesting perspective. But I watched it with my kids when I was an adult and like the original one. And thinking back on it, it's a wild and crazy show with, I think, a really horrible ending that this reboot really addresses. And let me tell you a few great things about the reboot. The chemistry between Hal and Lois is still there. And I think that Malcolm is a quite interesting character because he doesn't fit in with his family because he's so odd. But the thing is, his family is also very odd. Each of them individually are odd in their own ways, so you think that he would be able to fit in. But the whole show is about how you you love your family, but you can't stand them, and you want to kind of uh, get away from the same habits. Like my son and I were talking about it, and we were saying like, yeah, when you're like in your 30s, 40s, you're still going to act the same way when we talk because I don't know why that happens, but it 100% happens, you know. And it happens with like kind of negative relationships too. Like it doesn't happen very often, but you know, I'm sure everyone's had the experience of arguing with your ex-wife or ex-husband, and even though you haven't been together for whatever years, the arguments are exactly the same as the arguments you used to have. So it's kind of like a really profound thing. And I think that a great thing about Malcolm in the Middle, like the show and the reboot both, is that they can be incredibly funny and absurd and also have this like big heart. So in this show, Malcolm has a daughter who probably is like 14, 15, around there. And she's really struggling in school because she says that her personality is exactly like her father's because he's been raising her as a single father. And I don't know, I don't think if you raise somebody as a single parent, your child is automatically like 100% like you. But I think maybe that was a realistic thing for a kid to say. But she kind of has her own problems because I think that Malcolm, the character, is really smart, right? And he is able to, you know, kind of manipulate people. And that's a big problem in his life, actually. And his daughter doesn't have that, really. Like, she's not over and at, like, there's a scene where Malcolm is in trouble with his girlfriend because he's been hiding the fact that his family is alive. So obviously he would be in trouble. But he goes through like this, like, conversation with the audience, because in Malcolm in the Middle, he breaks the fourth wall because he's the main character. And so uh, he's having a conversation with the audience, and you can see like he's doing like both sides. Like, if I do this, I'll do that. I'll do this, I'll do that. And that's Malcolm's main problem, because he can't just exist in the world and react to the world. He wants to control everything. So that's his intelligence's problem. Like, that's the problem of him with his intelligence. And his crazy family, not exactly. Like, and as I said, it doesn't help because he has uh, negative sort of like behaviors that come out with his family and his brothers. But anyway, one of the funniest things in this is that they there's a scene where, so his daughter's problem is that she's too over analytical, and there's a scene in the show where she is like, she's just walking down and another girl says, hey, can you help me with my homework? And she's like, yeah, I can help you. I can see you've been worrying because you've been pulling out your hair. And she's like, oh my god, I said that. So she has this like social anxiety thing. That's what her intelligence makes her have, this huge amount of social anxiety. And she just says more and more, like, oh, you have ringworm, baby. I don't know. And it gets worse and worse. Oh, so funny. So funny. Another scene is like Malcolm eventually reunites with his family, and he's having like this heart to heart, like, I mean, his mom wants him to have a heart to heart moment with her in the bathroom. um, but there's the guy in the bathroom, and he is having like a bowel movement crisis, and you can just hear this at the same time. So it's just so funny. Oh, it's so funny. It's so funny. And Hal has these moments in this show, like, he's played by Bryan Cranston, so it's no surprise. But he's like funny and also kind of like really serious moments, because a bit of the plot is about Hal kind of coming to terms that his family doesn't need him anymore. And then Lois just wants to do one thing where she shows how much he means to her and to his family. So it's like a really sweet moment. But I think, and I mentioned a little bit about the problem of the ending of the original series. So the original series ended when, so Malcolm in the Middle, he Malcolm is a intelligent guy, and he's probably more intelligent than he is in his, like, his surroundings, his like family and stuff, but he's not brilliant, right? And I think they did do a good job of showing how, just because he did good on one test and he has like these skills, people have a lot of expectations of him. And his mom literally says, and there's some, I think, I don't quite remember exactly, but there's some tuition money so he can go to university, and somebody steals it or somebody uses it, and then they find out that he doesn't have any money to go to Harvard, and he needs to be a janitor. And his mom gives him this really weird speech at the end, which is like, you're going to be president, but you need to struggle. And so he has been avoiding his family for two reasons. The first reason is that he feels like he's going into these negative patterns all the time. And the second reason is that he also, uh, he doesn't want to disappoint his mom, because he's pretty successful. He's got like a girlfriend who loves him, he's got a daughter who loves him, he's got a nice career. So there's nothing he should be ashamed of. But his mom has such high expectations for him because he was the smart kid, even though Dewey was probably smarter than him. Um, and so he didn't want to disappoint his mom, so that's why he was avoiding her. So it's just so true. I think the great thing is that you can make a great show and it be, intellectually true. And I don't know why I said intellectually, like it can feel emotionally true as well. So I disagree with Alex Myers. I don't think that this show is worse than the Malcolm in the Middle. I just think it's a different thing. It's about Malcolm as an adult. So the themes and the way the show is made is going to be a bit different. Not that Malcolm in the Middle was from Malcolm's perspective. I think it kind of does the young Sheldon thing where it starts being about this boy who's supposedly really, really smart. Although Sheldon was really smart. I mean, and Malcolm too, but you know what I mean. Um, and then it became this whole ensemble cast because of the great acting of the supporting characters and the main characters in Hal and Lois. Um, Sorry, I have a bit of a cold or something. Yeah. If I was gonna say anything negative about the show, I think it would be the fact that it is only 4 episodes, and the kind of main thing of the main kind of plot point of the whole story is that, as I said, Lois wants to do this big thing for Hal and make this big romantic gesture. So she invites a bunch of people who were in the show, but don't really have any point of them being at this celebration, right? So you have a bunch of Francis's friends from the time he was in military school, and then you have a woman that Francis and his wife worked with on a farm, and that's how they met, right? Like, why would they be there? And I mean, there are some people there who make sense, like Hal's poker buddies, and yeah, but then there's uh, um, oh, sorry, lost my train of thought. There's Malcolm's friends from school. Like, why would you invite Malcolm's friends from school to come to your anniversary? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But they did that because they wanted like you to see these actors again. And it kind of makes sense, but like the show was 20 years ago and I watched it like 3 or 4 years ago. So it took me a while to figure out why he was talking to this guy named Stevie. And that was his best friend in the show, right? But also, they do this horrible thing where Stevie has some kind of condition that puts him in a wheelchair. And maybe the actor really has that kind of condition. I don't know. But they put him in a wheelchair and then he he talks like there's a break between what he says, and the break in the original show is like maybe 3 4 seconds, so it's just long enough to be uncomfortable but not horribly uh not not horribly irritating. But they have a scene in this reboot where Stevie's mom and dad are there for some reason, and they've been broken up for a while, and they're like fighting, and they're doing that thing where the dad says, "Tell your mother," to Stevie, like blah blah blah. So then it's supposed to be this funny bit where Stevie is like, "Dad says," but the gaps are much longer than I did it there. So um, yeah, I think that doesn't really work. Like, why exaggerate the characteristics of that character? Like, I think they did that just because people aren't gonna remember who Stevie was unless they go back and watch the whole series before watching this, which a lot of people don't do, right? Because you're busy and you just see the ads and Bryan Cranston and Freddie Munitz, I don't know, on Hot Wings, and you're like, yeah, I want to go watch that, which is what I did. Um, yeah, and then they have the characters that they introduce for this reboot. One is Malcolm's younger sister, who comes out as non-binary, and the other is Malcolm's daughter. And I think that Malcolm's daughter does like, first of all, the story focuses a lot more on her. So she has a lot more comedic moments, like the one in the school, super super funny, than her cousin does. But I understand why they wanted a character because that's a whole plot point of the end of the show is that Lois is pregnant again, so they'll have like 5 kids, and but that's also weird because she's non-binary, and one of the plot points of the original show was that Lois wanted a daughter and she had 4 boys. So, like, why wouldn't there be more conflict with Lois about that? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And just like there's so many other characters, like there's Reese and Dewey, who only comes via laptop. And so generally they replaced the actor who's playing Dewey, and you can kind of tell because that actor super charismatic, but I guess that he is in university and he didn't want to come back for this series, which, good for him because I guess he turned down a lot of money to do that. But um, so, like, by pushing all of these characters into this show, like, then there are things that don't make sense about the show. One thing is that they're like really upset that Malcolm is not going to come back for this reunion. And I understand the show is called Malcolm in the Middle, but in the show, Dewey's character is some like rock star who's going around the world, and he's not coming back. He joins by laptop, which what? Like, what kind of double standard is that, And, like, I can kind of see it from Malcolm's perspective, right? He is, like, think about it. His older brother turns his life around and has a long career, like 15 years or something, they say in the show. So then there's him, who does have a nice career, but he's a single father, and he's not the president of the United States like his mom wanted. And then you have his uh actually no, his older brother is like the oldest, and then there's another older brother called Reese. And his older brother Reese, like from their perspective, seems to be like helping out his dad and like spending a lot of time with his dad. And then you have Malcolm, and then you have Dewey, who's younger than Malcolm, and he's like this big rock star, so super super successful. And then you have, I forgot what their name is, that character, and who's still a teenager. So I can kind of see why Malcolm would feel like if he gets into all of these patterns of, he does the same thing with his parents. He doesn't want to hurt them, and he feels like he's something of a disappointment, why he would avoid them, you know? And they don't do that with Dewey, right? Which I understand because the show is not called Dewey in the Middle, it's called Malcolm in the Middle, but by the end it was an ensemble. No one ever says, hey, why isn't Dewey coming? It's like, oh yeah, because he's a rock star, and that's okay, you know? Like, what? Like, why can't Malcolm avoid coming? Like, he should see his family, right? He should talk to them, but the fact that he's avoiding them is uh, not strange. All right, what did you think about the Malcolm in the Middle reboot? Let me know your thoughts. Generally, I really liked it, but it was too short and too many characters for me. So if you like my reviewing, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff. Bye.